Hello everyone, welcome back. Wisteria here. Let's get into a fairy tale a folk tale I suppose, that I'm definitely interested in. This is called The Asrai. And there's a riddle at the beginning. A riddle, what can it be? A riddle, can you tell me? I tremble at each breath of air, and yet can the heaviest burden bear. The Asrai. The smallest pebble splashes through the surface, tumbling down towards the depths, and yet such great weights can sit on top of the water, never knowing what lies beneath. They never know what the water sports, what creatures live within its realm. Even today, explorers, they never know for sure what lies just beyond the reach of their fingertips, just beyond where sight will take them. Tom was out on the mere in Ellesmere. He was out in the boat on a short summer night. It had been hot, and the air was still warm. In the houses, the windows were open, and blankets lay discarded. On the mere, the air was cooler, and there was just a hint of breeze whispering in the reeds, rippling the water, and gently rocking the boat. Tom's nets were set, and he had nothing to do but wait for the fish to swim into them. He lay back in the boat, enjoying the quiet stillness of the night. The cool breeze caressed his cheek, and the branches overhanging the mere were silhouetted black against the velvet night sky. The moon was rising now, a full moon, fat and heavy, slowly clambering upwards above the branches and into the sky to join the stars. Tom's eyelids drooped, fluttering open every so often to see the moon a little higher, then closing again. At last, the moon began to sink. Tom knew that soon he would have to move, haul up his nets, row to the far side of the mere, and hide his boat under the brambles for another day. He stretched out, uncurling his fingers and toes, and sat up with a yawn. He took hold of the net and began to pull. The net was heavy, and Tom, wide awake now, smiled and began to pull harder in anticipation of a full load of gleaming fish. He gave one last heave and hauled the net over the side and into the boat. But it wasn't the slippery silvery bundle he had expected. He stared. He saw pale white limbs, thick shining tresses, 2 arms fastened tightly around 2 knees, and 2 big eyes staring up at him. Tom's mouth fell open in disbelief. Then he began to remember the stories. Stories told by the fire in the pub. Stories he scoffed at. Remember the tales of a race of people living beneath the mere, who only came up once in 100 years to bathe in the light of the full moon and to grow. A people called the Asrai. There was a whimper from the bottom of the boat, and the Asrai began to speak. Her voice was like rain on the reeds, a whisper on the water. Tom didn't understand a word, but he heard the longing, the need of a salmon fighting its way home. Without thinking, he bent down and began to unfasten the knots binding her. But then he did begin to think. He thought about his children, and how they all needed new shoes. He thought about his Asrai and its nets, and how he now had no fish to sell or eat. He thought of how much people would pay, big house would pay to have an Asrai right there with them, swimming in their pool, or even in their fish ponds. Big houses would pay for that. All these thoughts flashed through his mind. He hardened his heart and tightened the knots. He pulled out the oars and rowed towards the far side of the mere. The song of the Asrai got louder, and one arm pushed in way through the net, pointing towards the sinking moon and the brightening eastern sky. She caught hold of Tom's arm to get his attention, but the moment she touched him, she snatched his hand away as though it burnt. And Tom, he could still feel the imprint of her fingers, a cold band of moonlight wrapped around his elbow. Tom let his oars rest and reached over the side of the boat. Pulling up armfuls of reeds, he spread them over the Asrai to keep her skin moist, but also to hide the fear and confusion in the eyes staring up at him. Tom rowed hard, putting his back into the oars, making his way across the water to the overhanging bushes, where he kept his boat. He splashed out of the boat and into the shallows, pulling his boat up onto the bank. He reached down to lift the reeds out of the way to gather up the Asrai and take her home. But as he bent down, the sun rose over the trees, and the first fingers of sunlight reached into the boat. Beneath the reeds, nothing was left but a puddle of mere water. Tom stood silent and wistful in the dawn. At last, he slowly turned and walked home. There was nothing to show for a night's work, nothing but a cold ache in his elbow, and in his heart, a colder ache still. The end. That's a story that's been told many times over through centuries and changed as well, and different but same kind of. Some call them Asrai, some call them different names, the water people, but yeah, they can only come out in the moonlight. They wouldn't make it in the sun, hence why the Asrai didn't make it in the sun. Sad really, but thank you for listening, I truly appreciate it. Hit that like and share if you can. If you've not yet subscribed, please consider doing so. I would really appreciate it. Many blessings.